No Brainer is awful and the worst book in the series. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, Midits here. While still not incredible, I felt that Big Shot and Diaper Overload were a big step up in quality compared to the Deep End. I loved the ending of Big Shot where Greg felt like an active protagonist again. Seeing Roderick matter at all again in Diaper Overload was cool. I also enjoyed how we got to learn more from certain characters that had appeared in previous books. I found this book promising since it would be a school-focused story, something we haven't had since Double Down, I guess. So overall, I was super excited to read this book. Then I read it. I don't have a cool way to transition into this. Plot summary time. The book starts with Greg talking about the brain, and it's kind of similar to something mentioned in Double Down, with him talking about how you only have so much space in your mind, and that it clears things out for new information. He also mentions that teachers sometimes tell you stuff you can't use. Greg then talks about how his teacher didn't know Latin in his Latin class, and was telling the class completely useless information before being fired. Greg also mentions how his social studies teacher only talks about countries he plans on visiting when she retires. His geometry teacher spends the class asking the students to help her figure out what dog she's gonna get. The science teacher started talking about what farts are made to get students interested in the class. What am I reading? They play math games during the entirety of algebra since their old teacher left and a replacement was never found. So these kids are basically learning nothing. Things are so comically bad here that their school's test results were the worst in the entire state. The school's current principal gets fired and is replaced by the former principal, Mr. Bottoms. In a few days, classes that aren't on the standardized tests are cut and the non-cut classes become more serious. However, there's still obviously going to be a ton of issues. Like, for example, in science, it's going to be hard to learn things when there's barely any proper equipment in the lab. In reality, a lot of the school barely works. A chunk of the computer center's keyboards don't have all the letters, and most of the books in the library are gone because many graphic novels were banned for being considered inappropriate. And most of the books in there are awful because people gave the library a bunch of just completely random books when asked for donations. The new principal adds another feature that is pretty much just a class system. If you get high grades in school, you enter the High Flyers Club, where you get perks like choosing your seat with extra leg room. A row of seats were taken for the High Flyers, so Greg had to sit on the turned on heater. There are also free snacks, access to the teacher's lounge, a faster entrance into school, and they even get out of school early. So now everyone is trying the most absurd strategies for cheating so that they can get higher grades. The school holds an assembly where they bring in a guy whose life was ruined by cheating, but Greg mentions that he saw the guy at a dinner show once, so he's just an actor. Next up, we have some pretty big lore for the Diary of Wimpy Kid series. It's also my least favorite retcon in the whole series. The original principal of the school was Larry Mack, and since he became famous for a car dealership later, the school changed its name to Larry Mack Middle. So that means that the name of the school throughout the entire series was that, and I absolutely hate it. It just feels wrong since the name of the school in the movies was Westmore, and the prior books never contradicted that. You might say that name is just for the live action movies from a decade ago, so they don't matter, but that name is still used in the animated movies. So the school being named Westmore isn't an old forgotten thing. Anyway, it turns out that he got the money for his car dealerships by stealing money from the school. That's right, fraud is canon in Diary of a Wimpy Kid. He got arrested, but they still never changed the name of the school. The mascot is even a thief, which is based on Larry Mack. Albert Sandy makes a theory that Larry Mack only used half of the stolen money and that the other half was hidden under the school floor. Page 44 is also Rowley's first appearance in the book, which takes place entirely in school. He doesn't even say anything, he's just there. So now people are bringing in pickaxes, shovels, and screwdrivers to open up the school floor. Eventually, kids start destroying lockers, thinking the money might be in there. And now people use a giant hole made in Greg's locker by someone as a shortcut. So now there's a rule saying you're not allowed to bring digging tools to school after someone dug into the principal's private bathroom. Turns out, there's way more rules added than just that. Students need hall passes to be in the hallway during class, but now kids are making their own hall passes, so each teacher has to give students a unique hall pass, like a shoe, a dictionary, or a skeleton. You have to be in and out of the bathroom in 1 minute, but all of the bathroom monitors all quit, and after that, someone made a barber shop in the bathroom, which caused the bathroom mirrors to be removed. If you had no context, I would sound like a psychopath rambling on about absolutely nothing. Kids were messing around with bathrooms, so teachers occasionally had to go in there and stop them. But one part of the school only has female teachers, so they at first used blindfolds to go in, but then they started looking at a towel dispenser's reflection to see if students were doing anything bad in there. This ended up not being super accurate, as Greg got accused of doing something he didn't do. But one thing that got students super upset was the school removing, let me emphasize this, fudge dogs. Fudge dogs were a food accidentally made by a lunch lady in the school's cafeteria, which is a tofu dog covered in fudge. It became huge to the point that kids from Slacksville tried to break into the school to discover the recipe, and this is just the plot of SpongeBob. At least it's cool that Slacksville is mentioned again, so there's a shred of continuity. Fudge dogs were banned because the company hired by the school says they caused the drop in grades, as a lot more kids were visiting the nurse and falling asleep in class after fudge dogs were introduced. But now there are protests and riots in the school over fudge dogs being removed, so the principal and student council came to a compromise where students could have at most 1.5 fudge dogs per day. Can I just talk about how we're 1/3 of the way into the book and not much has really happened? So far, the entire plot has been that the students did terribly on their tests, the old principal got fired, and the new one made rules. That is everything that has happened so far. I'm pretty sure way more happens in any other Diary of a Wimpy book at this point in comparison to this. Greg mentions Larry Mack's son, Larry Mack Jr., who took over his business when his dad was arrested. This isn't really important now, but will be later. Since the school's been losing so much funding, a new rule has been made which limits the number of supplies a students can borrow. If anything is broken, it isn't replaced, the heat at school is turned off after lunch, the electricity gets just shut off in some parts, the school stopped paying exterminators, so now there are bugs everywhere. There's an entire room that got overtaken by honeybees, and the school just lets them have it. If you're wondering why I'm not pausing to talk more about all this insane stuff, it's because if I did stop at everything and talk about how much of a fever dream this book feels like, this video would be 2 hours long. Due to the amount of bugs in school, everyone is forced to leave their lunch in the front office, which causes most people's lunches to get swapped. There are mouse traps in the building where students can easily touch them. The school's been doing fewer assemblies, with the last one ending with a reptile expert accidentally throwing a snake into the crowd. This was apparently useful because it then began eating the mice in the school. As you can tell, the school is completely falling apart. Teachers are now leaving with there not being enough teachers for every class. The school went from having 2 school nurses to 1. And remember, this is Diary of a Wimpy Kid when I say this. Some of the janitorial team got replaced with a cleaning robot that has googly eyes on it. A cleaning robot that has googly eyes on it. The robot is also probably sentient. I'm just kidding. That would be insane. Why would? I don't even know what to say anymore. The local prison is also making the seats in the classrooms. Despite all this, the school is still doing very poorly financially, so now they're not just saving money, they're trying to make money. A version of the High Flyers Club is made where you don't need good grades, but you just need to pay a monthly subscription. There are also extra bonuses such as leather recliner seating, bigger snacks, passes that allow students to go wherever they want, skipping the line at lunch, and reserved seating. Now, the remaining teachers are upset as those students are entitled, and teachers can't use the teacher's lounge with the amount of kids in there all the time. The school is also taking sponsorships, and this would be a great place to put one if I was a big enough channel to get sponsorships. There are ads all over the walls, water fountains, the floor, inside of lockers, urinals, the computer lab, the teacher's lounge, staplers, science textbooks, vending machines, the morning school news program, the school newspaper, the entire gym, and the biggest one, the school being renamed to 1-800-DEAD BUGS Middle School. Parents were happy about this, so the principal had a new plan, and that was to close off a section of the school so that people could rent it. So now tons of people were at the school using those classrooms for different things. The gym is rented for high school basketball games, and the gym is completely trashed afterwards. A PTA event is held once per year for the school to raise money, but this one is especially big. Greg is forced to go by Susan, and we see that people are bidding on different items. There's a tradition where if enough money is raised, the principal will kiss a baby pig, which Principal Bottoms refused to do. And the biggest prize is that your child could become principal for one day. And Susan fights against another mom for that prize. She wins, so now Greg has to be principal for the day. This is obviously just some dumb fun thing where they say he's the principal, but not really. Greg is given a ton of papers. This kid who's like 12 has to do the work of a school principal for real. Greg is told that someone ripped out the bathroom sink, and he tries to get the help of the janitors, but they say fixing plumbing wasn't part of their contract. More of the school starts flooding, and eventually the janitors agree to fix the issue after making Greg give them better work benefits. They're talking to a middle schooler as if he has any idea how to do that. Greg has to deal with a bunch of troublemakers, but since he was so nice and handed out candy, everyone was getting in trouble on purpose so that they could go to the principal's office. Greg has to go to a staff meeting where all the teachers are complaining at once, and while Greg tries his best to get things more organized, he ultimately fails. It turns out that the people running some of the classrooms are arguing now, but before Greg can properly deal with that, Vice Principal Roy says on the loudspeaker that there will be an assembly. It turns out that this was the day that the principal was supposed to kiss the baby pig. So Greg quits after this. The next day, the school finds out that if the school's test scores don't improve, then the school will be shut down. Then, the students will be sent to two separate schools. One is a super nice school, and the other is a Slacksville school. Greg finds out that he's going to the great school, as it is decided by alternating names, but unfortunately, Rowley will be going to Slacksville. This would feel like an important plot point if Rowley wasn't completely non-existent in this book, but then Alex Aruda got enrolled in the boarding school early, and the entire list changed since his name came so early on the list. So now everyone who's going to Slacksville is going to the Incredible School and vice versa. So now Greg wants to try hard on the test, but it's impossible because first of all, it's Greg, and second, he doesn't have a lot of time to learn an entire year's worth of information. The school has the test, but from the moment it began, it was clear there was no hope of grades improving. Half of the kids weren't even trying to take the test, since they were going to be going to a way better school. Then, the bees from earlier somehow get into the classroom and cause a ton of chaos. So now the school is closed. Greg has to head to Slacksville in a pet grooming van as the buses don't head to Plainview. As Greg goes to class, he sees the school's curriculum is insanely behind. In this middle school, they're still learning about what squares, triangles, and circles are. Greg is now seen as being a genius, especially when, and get this, he knows how to read a regular clock. Greg becomes even more famous when he makes fudge dogs in home ec. Greg gets a girlfriend. Greg goes on a date with her and finds out that her dad is Larry Mack Jr. Greg doesn't impress him at first until he sees a Latin teacher at the restaurant they were at. He ends up being very impressed by Greg's Latin, which is completely fake by the way, and also his fudge dogs idea. After that date, it turns out that Larry Mack Jr. decided to reopen the school since he viewed the school as being the reason Greg was so intelligent. Also, it's named Larry Mack Jr. middle now. Another also, the cash in the wall was real. Albert Sandy was correct about something. Since the school is reopening, everyone is coming back, including the kids who went to the other school. So a lot of kids aren't happy with Greg now. You know, this callback would be way cooler if this book was good. Greg breaks up with his girlfriend he had for 11 pages. The school lost the idea of fudge dogs to Slacksville, and Principal Bottoms is completely gone, with the temporary principal being the cleaning robot. Worst book in the series. Easily blows the deep end out of the water. At this point, these books shouldn't even be in the realistic fiction genre, especially with the robot that seems to gain sentience. Every little detail of what happens in this book is so insanely over the top. It's disappointing that this is the story we got with the first proper school-centered Wimpy Kid book in a while. You can tell that Rowley is Jeff Kinney's favorite character by the fact he appears in probably less than 10 pages of the book. This is an issue I had before, and I need to say it again. Greg doesn't even feel like the main character in his own book anymore. He just watches stuff happen instead of being actively involved in the plot. Minus the ending, I guess, but that's just too dumb to count. This book is a slog to go through. You'll have one event happen, and the entire next chunk of the book is just talking about the event's immediate consequences. So it feels that almost nothing happens in this book, despite how much I talked about. Some positives I do have are that it's cool seeing a couple of old characters return here, and the amount of capitalized words is a lot less egregious compared to previous books. But let me just go back to that ending again. At this point, I'm not surprised in the slightest that the school shutting down was going to last. There will never be a significant change in this series again, as Wrecking Ball showed. But man, I've seen Wimpy in fanfiction that's more logically sound in this. Greg just gets a girlfriend and breaks up with her almost immediately afterward, and it was just used as a plot device to give the story a quick ending. Remember when Diary of Wimpy Kid was about growing up? It feels as if Jeff Kinney has completely run out of ideas for this series since he left Greg stuck in middle school. The next book, Hot Mess, has already been announced. It's going to involve Greg's family, which reminds me a lot of one of my favorite books, Hard Luck, but I don't really have my hopes high. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed it, so subscribe to see when future content comes out. That's gonna be it for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Edit, I just noticed something hilarious. On the Wimpy Kid fan wiki, it says that many main characters don't have a big role in this book. They give us examples such as Rowley, Manny, and Fregley, but then they list Holly, who was potentially referenced in Wrecking Ball, but last appeared in the third wheel. Why would they list her as a main character? She hasn't properly appeared in the book in over a decade.